Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 10 o'clock, so I think we'll make a start at this point. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet Committee Housing on Tuesday, the 5th of November 2024 from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 10 a.m. My name is Councillor Chris Westwood, Chairperson of the Committee and Cabinet Member for Housing. The meeting is live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles will be switched on and advice on how to turn these on is set out online. Can I ask everybody to ensure mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to use the microphones? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all instructions given to you by our team. Please note that there is a fire alarm test scheduled for approximately 10:15 this morning, so we will all enjoy that at 10:15. When that starts, we will pause proceedings and restart after the alarm. Can I welcome members of the public to the meeting this morning? We will invite you forward when it's your time for you to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda, the right way around. First of all, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe Councillor Becker sent apologies. We have Councillor Todd here this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Secondly, disclosures of interest. Are there any declarations to be made? Councillor Todd.
Yes, I have a personal non-prejudicial interest in that I'm a county councillor, and the county council does provide some funding towards housing and homelessness.
Thank you. No other declarations? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, just to say my husband is a member of the Trinity Board and we shall be discussing some of their involvement in temporary accommodation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 3, request from councillors to speak. I don't believe we have any requests from councillors for speaking at this meeting. Thank you. Item number 4, public participation. Mr. Tate wishes to speak on items 8 and 10, and Mr. Tate, you'll come up at the beginning of those items and speak at that point. Thank you. Item 5, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 5th of February 2024. Can I ask the Cabinet members if these are agreed as a correct record? Agreed. Thank you. Item number 6, Chair's announcements. I have no announcements to make at the meeting today. So moving swiftly on to the meeting. So item number 7, TACT Board report back. So the TACT Board is something that has been set up fairly recently. So following I'll do a short introduction to this, and then we will talk about the actual report itself. So following the introduction of the Social Housing Regulation Act, one of the many changes the Council has made as a result of that Act was to review and revise the membership in terms of reference for the Tenant and Council Together Board, known as TACT. Can I just stop there, pause? Lim, would you like to join us for this item? Sorry, apologies, I should have asked you before. I introduce Lynn Mellish, who's a member of the TACT Board and a resident. And be good to have you with this item. Apologies for not asking you at the beginning. The purpose of the TACT Board is to hold the Council's landlord services to account in the delivery of services and programmes. As such, it will receive reports and provide advice on the delivery of all aspects of the service. I am delighted to report that we now have a full TACT Board consisting of 4 residents, including tenants and 1 leaseholder, and 2 independent board members who bring external experience of housing from a large local authority and in customer service excellence from a utility company. In addition, there are 2 councillors, myself and Councillor Horrell, representing the administration and the principal opposition party on the board. This is a group of people who are passionate about delivering first-class housing service for all of our tenants and leaseholders, and I'm looking forward to working closely with them to hold their housing service to account and deliver a great service for our tenants and leaseholders. The newly constituted TAC board met for the first time on the 21st of October, and this report provides a summary of that meeting. The board considered the following 4 items: performance information for the second quarter 2024-25. It was recognised that improvements in the data to show quarter-by-quarter comparison on a number of different measures is required, and it was agreed to report performance information to the next TAC board in January 2025 with a revised format and a suite of data and information. Second item was the potential budget gap for the housing revenue account in 2025-26, and a number of proposed savings to bridge that gap were discussed at the meeting. Third item was a self-assessment against the social housing regulatory standards. The impending assessment by an independent organisation, which commenced in early November, was noted as well. And the fourth item was a report on the Housing Ombudsman and Companies. Pause. There is an important additional item for the board to consider, and that is the retendering of the repairs and maintenance contract. This paper was not available for the board on the 21st of October, but it's important the board reviews and provides feedback prior to the paper going to scrutiny and cabinet later in November. It was therefore agreed to hold a virtual meeting of the board on the 11th of November to consider the repair and maintenance procurement report that is being submitted to cabinet at its meeting on the 20th of November and gather the feedback from the TAC board to the contents of that paper. Overall, the first meeting of the board concluded that there was a need to improve availability and use of data on the housing landlord service, but the first step on the journey to improving and holding the service to account was welcomed. So that's my introduction. Are there any questions from the members on the paper? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, firstly to say congratulations and well done getting the board up and running with the cross-section of tenant representation and independence. I think is to be welcomed, and I'm pleased to be part of that. It was a very good discussion with all of us, so thank you for that. Just to clarify, this is just a matter of process and not on the content of the agenda item 7 report, which I am happy to accept, is these notes haven't been back to the board. These are just notes of the meeting. Are there going to, as we get into the process, are we going to have a formal minute taking and report back, or are we simply reporting, as you have done here, how the board sort of discusses items, just so for clarity going forward? I mean, I'm sure we're all in agreement with this, but as we go forward, just to help us from a governance point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Andy, can you help with that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You'll probably remember when you established the new sort of format for the TAC board as part of your overall tenant and resident engagement strategy, that you asked that the TAC board would provide an annual report back to this committee. And so that's what they will be doing on the basis of 12 months of operation. It was thought important, because this was the first meeting, just to bring a note back to this meeting to give members of this committee some comfort that the recruitment's taken place and the first meeting has happened and has been a very positive meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask how we're going to ensure we hear the views of tenants across the district? We are all very aware that the more remote parts feel somewhat neglected in how we conduct our business. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Power. The way we get feedback is many and varied. it's not just through TAC boards and consumer groups and so on. But I'll ask Mr. Hendy if he can add some more detail. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, just to remind you, the tenant engagement strategy was agreed by this committee previously, which part of which is the TACT board, which helps drive service performance and holds the service to account. But over and above that, we are committed to undertake as much engagement with the whole tenant and resident population we possibly can. For example, in this report, it was mentioned that we shared with the TACT board the position on the housing revenue account and the budget gap that exists and proposals around that. Our intention is that we will be using digital channels to engage with as many residents as we possibly can, because over that important issue, and be able to report that back to the February budget setting cycle. So it doesn't rely merely on the TACT board. We are engaging with the tenants and residents over and above that.
I see no more questions at this point. Any debate on this paper? I see no debate. Thank you. I am absolutely delighted that we have made such significant progress in getting the TAC board together. I'd like to thank all the officers involved, and the late nights that Mr. Hendy, myself and other officers did interviewing people. I'd like to thank the people who put their names forward. And I'm looking at you, Lynn, and I'm really grateful that you have stepped forward to help us with this board, and you bring experience, many years of experience of being a tenant and with the council. And I know that you're going to add significant value. So I thank you. You're here personally for what you're doing going forwards. The TAC board is merely one of many mechanisms that we are engaging and using to hear the voice of the tenant from across our very wide and extensive housing portfolio and tenant base, and genuinely to use that board as a board to run the business and drive the business and hold Mr. Hendy and his team to account to deliver the level of service and quality of service and value for money that we'd all like to see. So thank you very much. So there was one recommendation on this paper, which is to note the matters that were considered at the first TAC board. Can I ask those are noted, gentlemen? Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item number 8 is new homes update. Mr. Tate, you want to speak on this, but before we move, I will do a short introduction to the item. I'll call you forward to speak at that point, and following that we will move on to Caroline to deliver the short presentation update on the New Homes programme. So the New Homes programme, in 2024-25 budget agreed at full council in February 2024, the commitment to deliver 1,000 new homes was reiterated, but it was also agreed, given the challenging financial situation following a period of high inflation, significant higher building costs and higher borrowing costs, to continue the new approach of acquiring more homes from developers alongside our previous approach of building new homes ourselves. This update will provide information on how we are progressing towards meeting the 1,000 home target, with a view of the schemes we anticipate taking forward in the short to medium term, and also a look at the longer term opportunities for achieving that 1,000 home target. As I say, Caroline will take us through a short presentation and update, and following that presentation there will be time for a few questions. Before we do the update, Mr. Tate, would you like to step forward? And in the time-honoured fashion, there will be a clock appear somewhere, and you know what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet. I've got 2 points or questions I'd like to make. As Cabinet may recall, last month I raised the issue of viability of delivering the Council's Corner House affordable housing scheme, and I did actually touch upon the minimum space standards. Of the 6 flats proposed, 2 have a gross internal area of just 36 square metres, which falls below the minimum space standards. The standard states that a 1-bed, 1-person flat with a shower rather than the bath must be at least 37 square metres. For a small flat, 1 square metre makes a big difference. The policy goes on to state that a 1-bed, 2-person flat should be at least 50 square metres. So really the properties are only aimed at, Chair, I've been given 5 minutes, not 3 minutes. So the site won't deliver perhaps the right form of housing for Winchester. I must question why the council has disregarded or circumvented its own local plan, the DN2 dwelling size policy. Does the council's action just open the door to other housing providers to come forward with schemes which fall below the minimum standards? And if they did, how would the planners react? Any members of planning will recall former councillor Frank Pearson repeatedly challenged developers when they reneged or on delivering decent sized homes. So I do question why the council has accepted that. My second question regards Dykes Farm, which, as some members may know, is land that lies adjacent to Eastern Lane, behind Erasmus Park and the Winnell Trading Estate. This site has been included in the Future New Homes programme since February 23. And from my own understanding, I know the site quite well, it's probably one of the most sustainable locations in Winchester, with the bulk of the developable area within a kilometre of the centre of Winchester. So my question is that just an anomaly that it's been dropped from the programme, or are there any reasons for it? I'm going to repeat myself here. I've regularly suggested the council should be looking for larger sites to deliver meaningful numbers of homes, and I think potentially Dykes Farm combines a very convenient and sustainable location and the ability to deliver some quite significant numbers. So I'd be very grateful to know what the council's thinking on this site is, and whether Ms Egan can give us any additional information. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, and we'll time down to 2 minutes. Know the drill. Okay. Just to answer questions there. Firstly, Dykes Farm will be covered during Caroline's presentation following our answers here. In terms of the corner house, then you did indeed raise that at a previous meeting, and so Caroline, would you just like to just give us an update on the points there, and just help us with those?
Yeah, of course, happy to. Thank you. So Mr. Tate is obviously right. It's a city centre location, and we have designed the flats for 1-bed accommodation. The application went through planning committee and was interrogated there and consented. That being said, we are looking to do some tweaks to our design. We want to make sure that the 1-beds are absolutely right for our residents, and our officers will be taking a further report in the new year to update on any design features that have been changed and make sure that our business case works. So it is a work in progress. We do have planning consent, and we recognise that they're 1-bed units.
Thank you. In summary, that paper will come back to Cabinet at some stage for approval for the spend for the conversion of Corner House, and that will be a subject that will be discussed, Mr. Tate, and will be within and agreed by the council's planning policy. It needs to be within that policy. Thank you. Hey, so Caroline, would you like to give us the update and short presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have to join the meeting, so can you just bear with a few little technical matters I need to go through? I didn't want to join too early because it takes the picture off the screen. So Muted. Right, let me just share my screen. Great, can everybody? Yeah, everyone can see that. Thank you. So for those who haven't met me yet, oh, is there a slight echo or is that just me? Hang on. There we go. For those who haven't met me yet, I'm Caroline Egan. I'm the service lead for New Homes Delivery. Today's presentation provides a high-level update on the New Homes programme from now until 2032. This first slide shows the projected figures for the delivery of new homes by the council up until 2032. You can see 3 lines on the graph. All 3 lines start at the base figure of 276 units, which is the number of units that have been delivered by the council since 2020. These figures are based on a programme of affordable housing opportunities across the district that we have RAG rated as green, amber or red based on their current planning situation, commercial viability and needs data. The blue line at the top shows the highest number of units that could be delivered by all our green and amber schemes in our current programme. This shows a total of over 1,300 units being delivered by 2032. The orange line shows our view of a more likely scenario, where all the opportunities that we have ranked as green in our RAG rating are delivered, plus 75% of those we have ranked as amber. And this shows a total of about 1,100 units. And then finally, the green line shows a lower, slightly more pessimistic figure, where 75% of our green RAG rated schemes are delivered, and a further 50% of our amber schemes, showing a total of almost 900 units. So overall, we're optimistic that we're on target to achieve the ambition of 1,000 new homes being delivered by the council by 2032. This next slide provides further detail on the types of scheme we intend to bring forward. Due to current market conditions, there is an opportunity for the council to deliver a significant proportion of the programme via Section 106 opportunities. Members may be aware, for example, of the potential Section 106 affordable acquisitions that have recently gone or are going through Cabinet for schemes at Twyford and Kings Barton. These demonstrate how Section 106 units can be delivered at a lower cost per unit to the council in comparison to commission schemes. You can see from the pie chart that our current programme is showing 45% of units being delivered via Section 106 acquisitions on developer-owned land, and a further 12% through Section 106 opportunities on land that the council currently owns, but is likely to be developed out by third parties. There is also a further 12% of units delivered via additionality opportunities on third-party land. Commission schemes on council land still form a very important part of the programme, however, with 28% of units planned to be delivered via this mechanism. Finally, 3% of units are anticipated to be built on rural exception sites, albeit further in the future due to the length of time it takes to bring such sites forward. This slide provides a medium-term forecast of the schemes we are bringing forward at the moment. There are many more schemes that are not listed here, which are very much on our radar. And for example, that would include Dykes Farm, which Mr. Tate has referred to. However, further discussions with landowners, developers, planners and housing colleagues are required to ensure these are viable opportunities for the council. The list on the screen focuses on those that are green RAG rated over the medium term. The list demonstrates the varied delivery mechanisms available to us and the geographic spread of schemes across the district in rural and urban areas. The table on this slide shows the council's delivery programme alongside the anticipated delivery of registered provider schemes according to consented planning applications. This shows the council is delivering approximately 1/3 of the total number of units across the district and highlights the important role registered providers play in affordable housing delivery. And my final slide shows the geographic spread of council schemes completed in green and on site in light blue, plus the council and registered provider schemes that are likely to be delivered in the medium term, shown in dark blue and yellow respectively. We're currently working on a map that will sit alongside this one that will show the need in the different areas of the district so that need and forecast supply can be viewed side by side. It's really important that schemes are assessed from a need as well as a financial perspective, and this next piece of work will enable us to analyse opportunities more effectively. Many thanks.
Thank you for that. So we do have a little bit of time for some questions. So, Councillor Cutler.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. I have 3 questions. The first is that the wine cross at Borehant's not mentioned, and I wonder what the status of that is. I note that there are no forecast registered provider housing in West of Waterlooville, when I thought there was quite a substantial amount that Grainger would take on themselves, as so that would add to the numbers, and I just wonder whether there was a reason that they weren't there. And I suppose my third question is, recently listened to a radio program where there was a lot of talk about developments not coming forward because registered providers didn't have the funds to buy the 40% or whatever the allocation was, so they couldn't even start the process. And I presume that's one of the reasons why it's become a little easier for us to buy, and the same circumstances. And just a comment on whether you think that will be an ongoing problem with all these expected delivery of registered providers. So they were my 3 questions. Thank you.
And if you can help us with the answers there, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. So yes, wine cross is very much on our longer list. So I recognise it doesn't form part of that table that you saw on slide 4, I think it was. As has been mentioned before, both today and in other forums, you know, we are struggling with viability on some of our schemes, and unfortunately wine cross does fall into that at the moment. We're having to do some further work on it and are preparing a paper, and we'll be briefing ward members hopefully in the next couple of weeks on that one, if that helps. Thank you. Second question, West of Waterlooville, were you referencing the map that I showed that it didn't state on there? Sorry. If it's not on there, then that may well just be an error on the map, for which I apologise. I would need to check that with my colleague who provides me with the data. So it absolutely should be on there. It's a big scheme. So yes, thank you for pointing that out, and I'll pick that up. The third point, I think I listened to the same radio article, and yeah, RPs are really struggling, and that's partly what's providing us with an opportunity ourselves to step into some of their shoes, although obviously we need to be careful we're stepping into the right ones. We foresee that being the case over the next couple of years for sure, in terms of RPs finding it difficult to bring schemes forward. We think a longer term position is that they will recover. My understanding is a lot of their lack of wanting to even start the process at the moment is because of the works they're having to do to refurbish properties, cladding issues such as that, and that's what's causing essentially cash flow issues in their budget. So I see it as a next 12 to 24 months, and then I think the market will be more stable and more normal.
Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Very interesting. I have 2 questions. Slightly perplexed about the 9 units delivered on the border of Northington and Itchen Valley, which I wasn't aware of. So I would like clarification on that. And have we been able to assess the impact of the minor measures in the budget regarding affordable housing yet?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I, in terms of your first question, do you have a number on the map of which scheme that is? Because I can reference it against a list I have, if that would help.
It's 9.
It's number 9 on the map. Thank you. Bear with me. That says Station Close, Itchen Valley Parish.
Oh.
I'm going to confess this is obviously before my time because I only joined a couple of months ago, and that's a completed scheme. Could be some time ago. Does that help?
And strangely located on the map.
Is it? Oh,
Throw.
no, that's very helpful. Thank you. Apologies. I will get that amended, so thank you for that. Second question about the budget. We have obviously been talking about it internally. We haven't made public any discussions we've had of yet. There are some small opportunities that we can absolutely take advantage of. And we're talking with our finance colleagues about some of those. So yes, we are taking them on board, but it's a little bit early for us to publish anything yet.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. Another question about the map. The 22 in Crawley on the map may need some explanation, please. I'm not sure where they are. And a follow-up really on the RP question raised already to some extent by Councillor Cutler. Our relationship with registered providers has waned, and I think in the past we don't have the same robust discussions that we used to have. And I know Mr. Hendy's had that as a focus, but what confidence can we take from your list on page 21 of the report that the RP numbers of 1,923 over the time period are realistic, because our experience has perhaps been less than favourable with many of them, and given some of those uncertainties you've just raised, I think site that's missing, others have been raised. Dykes Farm is a very good example of a very sustainable site with benefits from the South Downs National Park as well, that's not here. It would be helpful, Chair, I think, to see that list and what is turning it from being on the to-do list rather than the doubtful list. What criteria are you using to move things out? Is it simply viability, or are there other elements that are missing? And in the time frame, I would have thought we might have had something from Central Winchester. We're committed as part of that scheme to have affordable housing. I don't see that unless that's on your out list. So that broader list, Chair, I think for this group would be helpful to understand. And also on the pie chart, the rural schemes are obviously in the minority, and I know you personally committed to making sure that we had a rural strategy, ensuring, although the numbers may be less, the importance of the villages who want to have accommodation and remain sustainable. Where might we see that in the future in terms of how we're tackling that, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the 5 questions. Caroline, if you'd like to have a go.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm really sorry about the map. Slightly regretting the map. So number 22 is Woodman Close in Sparsholt. It's probably just really, I think it's difficult with the scale of the map to get them in the right place. I'm slightly defending myself here. It's in the wrong village altogether. Okay, but it is Woodman Close in Sparsholt is what it's supposed to represent. So apologies again for that. I won't be doing the map again. I will be checking my map better next time, and that's noted. RP relationships, really good point. So we have there is a programme of meetings that officers are having with all the large RPs in our area. So we've already met with Vivid and Abri, for example, and we have a list of others that we're working our way through. My understanding is before my time there had been some form of RP forum that had taken place. We found it actually conversations more fruitful when we spoke one-to-one with RPs, just because of the commerciality of the information that we were discussing with them. So we've now shifted to that model of meeting them individually, and that's what we're going through at the moment. And I've got several in my diary to take place over the next couple of months. In terms of the list that we shared in that presentation, it was very much a short list of the ones that, you know, are going forward right now. There is a much longer list which contains many sites, including Central Winchester, including Dykes Farm, which has been discussed. And that list is not one that we're ignoring. It's very much one that we are looking at everything on it regularly and have you know, dates and milestones and targets for those other sites as well. I know, for example, that my colleague Simon Maggs has been in touch with Mr. Tate this week about Dykes Farm, for example, and we're very much interested in speaking to the landowner there. There was an option on that site, for example, which has fallen away now, so the situation has changed, and that means it's an absolutely perfect time for Mr. Tate to raise it and for us to start discussing that with the landowner. So just to reassure that that longer list is very much active. It's just they're not ones that are about to be delivered, if that makes sense. And then the final question I'd noted down, but let me know if I've missed one, was about rural strategy. So that is absolutely on my list to progress realistically in, you know, from January, I would say, but that is very much something we're focusing on, and I know there's a strong desire for rural schemes across the district. So yeah, we're going to be working with officers around the county to develop that.
Thank you, Caroline. So the other question was around Central Winchester and the housing on the development site in Central Winchester, which will be on our long list, and we just need more clarity on what is happening in Central Winchester before we can promote that up our list. In terms of the list of potential sites going forward to the red list, we've not published that, so that's why it's not there. If I can just, but I am happy to share that with the members, that just to demonstrate that we've not dropped these schemes. They happen to be, for whatever reasons, further down the road, and so they weren't part of this particular presentation. Just looking back on Dykes Farm, just to answer fully Mr. Tate's question there, the scheme is on the list. It has not been dropped, and the delay there is due to the landowner's requirements to be able to take that scheme forward, as Caroline intimated there. So it is not a dropped scheme. It's just that we can't see that moving within the short to medium time period. Councillor White.
So you mentioned about housing need as well as the viability of the schemes. You said it's not on the map at the moment. I'm not really clear on how that is, how that feeds into how you make the decisions on the opportunities and how it's monitored and measured.
Thank you. That's a good question, one that I was going to raise anyway, but we'll answer that now. And we'll just I'll just say my piece on that. My view on the development for new homes is it has to be demand led, and we have to build where there is demand. We have to build the right size of accommodation to match that demand going forward. So that is the premise that we work from. If there's demand, then we need to build out the capability, and there are gaps on that map where we are aware of demand. And it'd be very interesting to overlay the demand onto the development plan, which we will be doing, and pulling out those areas where we don't have schemes at the moment. I can pick one out for Councillor Powell. Alresford, for example, is an area that we're well aware is demand for homes, which we are not fulfilling at the moment. Do you like to?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I have much further to add. I thought that summarised it well. It's just so that we can make sure we're matching schemes, opportunities to check there is demand, and I work very closely with Julie's colleagues who measure that demand at officer level. Okay, I didn't see any further questions, so Caroline Horrell.
Chair, just one area that it would be interesting to see if it's on Caroline's list, which is sort of repurposing of sites. We have sites where we're perhaps not maximising that we own currently. What could be there? Eastacre is a good example of land within our grasp that maybe we could make more of, and also land that we've been given or own, where obviously we don't have any cost at that point for the land. That doesn't mean to say the scheme is viable necessarily. So are they on your other list, just to be reassured that we're maximising the opportunity within some of the parameters that we clearly can control as a council? We're not looking for others to give us space to build. Thank you.
You can help us with that one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm Eastacre is one that is on our longer list, as are many others. Always happy to, share that information with you. We wouldn't necessarily make it public just because of the commerciality of some of those potential sites. But yes, and we'd always want to focus on sites where we are in control of the land ownership, because that gives us that control, which is helpful. So yes, please do ask me, and I can confirm with you.
Thank you.
Councillor Todd, I'd like to make this the last question, if we may.
Thank you very much indeed. And like others, I would be very interested in seeing what the demand by ward and settlement is and how it matches up to our programme. I've got another question about RPs. So one of the things that was being said, which quite surprised me, at the Local Government Association conference, was that quite a few RPs are consolidating their footprint, pulling out of particular areas. So obviously it's come up in Winchester in the context of the Bournemouth Churches Housing Association, and I know we're looking at opportunities there. But I mean, have we picked up, or are we aware that anyone else that is a provider in the Winchester district is having similar thoughts and plans?
If I can come in. Not specifically, no. It has been mentioned to me by one RP that they are focusing, it's more that they're new opportunities they are focusing in smaller areas. I think it's often to do with their maintenance schedules, and they're struggling sometimes to give a good service to people in such a wide geographic spread. And so that's been mentioned to me sort of informally, but no RPs as yet have said we are looking to get rid of any stock. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. I think it comes back to the point that was mentioned by others, that we need to keep having these conversations with RPs, since it seems to be a new emerging trend that they are looking at how they consolidate their operations. And we need to make sure that, we continue. Firstly, there may be opportunities. I'm not sure it counts as net extra housing, but there may be opportunities to strengthen our footprint within the district where we know that there's demand for our housing. And secondly, to make sure that we don't lose social housing as a result of that consolidation. So it is definitely something I think that we should keep a close eye on and strengthen those RP relationships so we get early sight of when it might be an issue.
Thank you, Councillor Todd.
Am I allowed to ask a follow-up on the back of Councillor Todd's very good point about RPs? And that is from a tenant point of view, Chair, that we have tenants who really don't have good experiences with some of the RPs in our area. Councillor Todd knows and tried to help on some of that. That when we're having these discussions, that we realise that there are some who have not served our current residents well, just to be aware of that as to who we're having those conversations with. That would be helpful in the context of new, certainly, because many tenants are very unhappy with the provision from some of them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good point. I mean, I experienced that as well within Humber work as a ward councillor, so I'm well aware of what's going on. So I'd like to close this session out now. So first of all, I'd like to thank Caroline Egan for presentation and update there. I'd like to thank the whole New Homes team actually, because I asked them to work in a slightly different way, which was to demonstrate to me that we had a pipeline of opportunity, that we were qualifying opportunity properly, and it was being demand led, and we were aligning the work that we were doing to the demand that we see out there. And I'm I'm very pleased with the work that you and Simon have done over the last many months to get to a point where we have clear transparency really on the schemes that we want to take forward and clarity on how we will achieve the 1,000 homes target in the time frame that we've set out, and that we have sufficient opportunity RAG rated to be able to achieve those numbers. So thank you for that and the work that your team's doing. Thank you. Moving on, item number 9, retrofit programme update. So Prashant, if you'd like to join us. There's no registered speakers on this, so I'll do a short introduction if I may, and then I'll hand over. Thank you. In the 2024-25 budget agreed at full council in February 24, we announced a programme of work to improve the energy efficiency of our council-owned homes through investing £45 million into retrofitting the fabric of our homes to lower tenants' energy costs and to provide warmer and more comfortable homes. The programme of work cannot be delivered without the support of our tenants, and it's important to say again that this work to improve the energy efficiency of our council homes is something we are working with tenants to achieve. It is not something we are doing to tenants. The tenant engagement activities are as important to the success of this programme as the physical fabric upgrades. Presenter Burbridge will take us through a short presentation, an update on the progress of the retrofit programme, covering both the physical fabric upgrades and also the tenant engagement programme, and there will again be time for a few questions at the end of the update. Presenter, if I can hand over to you.
Yes, thanks. I'm assuming there's some slides.
Can you just bear with us a second, please, Chair? We're just sorting this out because I thought that was going to be the case. So we'll work out if someone can share their screen to get the slides up. I haven't got the invite at the moment, but if I get that, we can do it.
Apologies. Thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, I think as Councillor Westwood said, this is a brief update as to where we are with the retrofit programme for 24-25. This is our targets that were set out in the beginning of the financial year. I'll take you through some of the main points, but I think in principle what we really want to understand is that retrofit depends on so many other moving parts. And so as we go through the year, there's some programs that are able to accelerate and some that need a bit more time. Unlike kind of planned maintenance where you can have fixed numbers, retrofit is kind of, let's, accelerate where possible. We also have many technical requirements and compliance steps prior to entering a home to retrofit that sometimes hinders progression. So if I take you through some of the main points, we have the Swedish cottages right at the top, our target being 21 properties. Of the 21 properties, they are spread over 4 sites. 3 of the 4 sites are now active, with the one site in Coldsmead shortly to start. So that means 17 properties are undergo. And these are whole house retrofit, so they are quite technically challenging and requires quite a lot of the team's time and support with the contractors on site. The D4 and C4 measures are on their way with technical surveys beginning this month. There are quite a few compliance requirements within there because we're touching quite a few areas, although it seems like we're just insulating and upgrading ventilation. Because you're interfering with quite a few aspects of the property, you need to ensure that those are safe places to work. Those will progress, and we're hoping that they can begin in December. I will touch on this later on within the tenant engagement section, but there's already been tenant engagement on this aspect of work, and we're hoping there'll be a greater pace in delivery due to that tenant engagement. The voids, loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, we've met that target, and most people would say, well, why don't you increase the target as you've met it already? But we feel as a team it's a good place to stop and look at the quality and compliance of those. So are we doing it to the right standard? Are we achieving our intended outcomes? And are we compliant? Is the quality correct? So that's where we are, and there's some work to be done in analysing that. We've got the single glazed within conservation areas. We've just got all the properties surveyed by an architect, and we're due to appoint a contractor within the next couple of months. And then we've got the cavity wall pilot. Here we've done the cavity wall insulation. It was clear through the pilot that cavity wall insulation replacement is required. And the next step is to ensure that we upgrade the ventilation and install better loft insulation in those properties. I think ultimately what we're realizing is that there's a pattern, and we're learning quite a lot on the work we're delivering at the moment in terms of what is successful and what isn't, what works and what doesn't. And then alongside, we've got planned maintenance who are upgrading windows and putting in cavity wall insulation and loft insulation. So where we stand in terms of EPC at the moment, we're sitting as we are with numbers delivered this year at 30% EPCC, D, apologies. There is work that we're currently doing as we speak. There are calculations being done to forecast what is required from now until 2030 to achieve that EPCC target. And a majority of the properties within that 30% are traditionally built. So they will rely on that loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, and it's just looking at what that next step is to make sure that they get to the EPCC. This is just some of the work being carried out. On the left is the Swedish cottages. So this is re-roofing. There have been some stringent ecological requirements. So timing's been tight, but we have stripped, so we've met the ecological requirement in terms of ensuring that bats are safe. And in the middle, we've got the EPC D4 and C4 in progress. This is topping up loft insulation, ensuring roofs are ventilated, which is that slight strip you see in the soffit of the roof. Adding ventilation, we've done a thorough comparison of various products and chose the ventilation product we feel we can back. It ensures that it generates a good relative humidity in the property, and we get some monitoring from those devices so that we can understand the usage within the property. The top right hand is empty cavity wall, where we can fill cavity wall insulation, and the bottom is cavity wall insulation is really dependent on good drainage around the property. So in some instances, we're having to insert drainage. In some instances, we're having to ensure that that drainage is in good condition. So as I said earlier, these are not necessarily things we know within our database. It's things that we come across as we go about our delivery, but we just need to ensure there's compliance. So it does add time. The tenant engagement, as I explained earlier, we're really pleased that we will have a tenant liaison officer, or resident liaison officer, joining the team in November, and really this person will be tasked at developing a full strategy, developing and progressing our online presence as it stands, and helping us with those tenant engagement forums that we have, and we hope to increase those. We've had coffee mornings, and these, it says invites have sent, but actually we've just held 2, with the third one being delivered this Thursday. They're really successful. In some instances, we don't necessarily get a good turnout, but our idea is that if we are able to inform and empower tenants with the knowledge as to why we're doing certain things and how they take place, it puts everyone in a better position. And if neighbours begin to talk to each other about how and why the contractors are sequencing their installations in a certain way, it makes for a far easier installation. Our previous or last coffee morning was very successful with quite a good turnout, and it was an interesting session in that we learn as much from the tenants about their lifestyles and their homes as much as them learning about the retrofit initiative. We have looked at customer service and quality reviews to ensure that there's further take up. But I think most tenants at this moment are welcomed to the retrofit. It's just about sequencing and the duration of the time, or the time it takes to deliver the retrofit. It's not done all in one fell swoop. It's done in several visits, and it's often that these visits are disruptive. We have the Swedish tenant forums, which were completed. These were very much a success, and we hope we can deliver a mid-project forum. And then we have media and communication progress. And as I say, the RLO will help us advance that. And that's the update. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Prashanta. Similar to the new homes update with the retrofit, what I wanted to do going forward was to, you saw with the pie chart there, we understand exactly the numbers of properties that we need to raise to EPCC and where they sit at the moment. And you alluded to it there, Prashanta, that we are looking at the forecast, how we approach this to deliver this by 2030 through the remaining housing stock that we know we need to upgrade, and that will be developed. And I think that's a very important part of the programme going forwards, and that kind of teases up from what we're going to do in the following years. This year's very much a focus on our most poorly performing homes, which was we agreed the funding for this at the Cabinet a few months ago. And I'm glad that is now progressing, and that we're moving forwards with those cottages there, which will make a big difference to the people living in those homes themselves. I think most of them are EPC E or something like that, and very poorly insulated and difficult to heat and expensive to run. So thank you for the update there. We have time for a few questions, although I'm keen to move on to the final paper fairly shortly. Councillor Power, followed by Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I have 4, but I think they are short. Prashanti, I'm very excited about the ventilation measures because I regard damp as my specialised subject. Are you collecting personal stories of the upgrade process? Because this will be key in converting others to join the programme of retrofit. We still have some solid fuel systems, I'm aware, in our council houses. I'm not sure whether this comes under the maintenance programme or under the retrofit programme, so I would like to see an answer on that one. And are we taking advantage of any voids to make sure we do the retrofit while the property is empty? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Powell. Forgive me, those are 3 questions, am I correct? Okay. So in terms of personal stories, which was the first question you asked, we do ask tenants if they're willing to come forward. A lot of them, if they are willing to at least come forward and provide a story or review, it's often quite restricted and restrained in terms of whether they want to put their names out in the public. And often we say, well, just a quote, or we try and tease it out, but it's very rare that we've been able to have full statements. We have had positive feedback, we've had positive emails, but when taking that further step in terms of making it public, we do get hesitation. So we try not push tenants in that respect. In terms of solid fuel systems, yes, it does sit with maintenance, but this is where we work together. So one of the big questions, which is what Councillor Westwood was alluding to, was that what is that next step? And the next step will look at our heating systems, because ultimately that would be the logical next step from Fabric. So we certainly are working with maintenance and looking at what that next step would be, and solid fuel and a number of other of our systems that are, that are either not towards gas or moving towards renewables will be looked at, if that answers. And then, yes, we, as per my slide, voids, we do cavity wall insulation and loft insulation. Those were the biggest numbers really in the delivery. But because they're fast paced, often you don't necessarily get the quality we require. And so that's why we're pausing them at the moment, so that we can do that audit and evaluate and ensure that the compliance and the quality is correct before we keep rolling them out. So it's just ensuring that, we don't just kind of do the numbers and actually look at the quality as well.
Chairman, may I just add, sometimes a local councillor can persuade a fuller statement out of people, and I'm quite happy to be used in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Power. And I think you raise a very important point. It's one that I have discussed with the team, is that we do need to be very transparent on where we're working across the district and involve the local ward members in each and every occasion. Thank you. Councillor Clear. Councillor Clear, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. May I just ask, do you, because of the amount of work involved, and it's, you come backwards and forwards, and do the tenants work generally quite well with you and obviously understand that the work is required? Because I have one or two residents in my ward that regularly ring me up and say, how much longer is this going on? So may I ask you that question, please?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Clear. I think ultimately where tenants have come to forums or where we've engaged with them, they understand a lot better why it's done in a certain sequence and why the work is necessary. As I said, the tenant coffee mornings and evenings have been very successful in being able to deliver that message, because ultimately understanding the sequence and understanding the reasoning helps. I do appreciate that some tenants have had a harder time with contractors visiting more than they should. I think what also adds to that is that we've also got these technical surveys that need to take place before the work started. So before tenants begins to see any change in their home, they're opening the door twice or three times to different specialists in order to ensure that the work is safe for themselves and for the contractors carrying out the work. So we do, where we find hesitance, and we do ask tenants to please come back to the team, because when we have had tenants come back to the team, explaining and having the opportunity to explain to tenants the reasoning behind the various sequences and programs, we get a far more positive outcome from that.
Chair, may I just ask one more thing? Is it possible then, because I go round and I think, well, I didn't realise this was being done in this area, is it possible to let the ward councillors have a list of the actual properties or roads that you will be working at? That would be a lot of help. Thank you.
Prashanta, I presume that is possible to do. You're nodding your head there. And I think there's two parts to this. One is we know where we're going to work, so we should proactively involve the ward teams and let them know what's going on in their areas. And the second is that we've always talked about this programme of work for a property, that we don't turn up and say we're going to insulate the roof. What we turn up and say is this is the steps that we need to take to improve the energy efficiency and the quality of your home. And it may be that is a 2 or 3 step process. And we just need to be very clear when we first engage with the tenants that this is not, we come in, we do one job, walk away, and it's done. This is, and they're very clear on the programme of work that's will happen to the house, and that could actually roll forwards into windows replacement, which might be scheduled in a couple of years' time or something like that, so that there is a clear roadmap for that property that the tenant understands at the outset. Councillor Horrell, and after that, Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome and maybe your appointment of a retrofit liaison officer will be helpful in that dialogue that perhaps we're all touching on this morning. Just a reiteration, I think all of us could help more if we understood what was happening where, because often people come to us when they're on the back foot and we could be more proactive and supportive, I think, if we understood that. So comms with your councillor team, we can be ears and eyes for you in situ. I think that would be helpful. And the other just question more about the work though, Presenter, and you've said that you're learning, and obviously you are, and developing. What is the key thing that you've learned that you're changing from when we started? We had high aspirations. What are you having to modify that perhaps we all understood we were going to do X, but now you're having to do it perhaps differently, or you've taken a slightly different approach? Where is that biggest learning for you and the team? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Horrell. Thank you for that question. It's a really good one. I think ultimately it's a fine balance between numbers and quality, because if we chase the numbers, we forget our tenants along the way. And so it's been really crucial for me and my team to ensure that we put the health and safety of our tenants and the contractors at the heart of the delivery of retrofit, and that the numbers will follow suit if we get those core requirements correct initially. So I think instead of it being numbers first, we just had to flip it a bit. But I'm certain that once we have the strategy and the requirements for compliance and health and safety and the sequence of those, we can definitely start to see acceleration.
Hence my request for a clear plan that takes us from now to 2030 and a view of it, and we clearly the plan will modify as we go forwards because every plan changes, but just as we understand that sequence of events that we need to go through. Councillor White.
You kind of answered it in the last one, really, about how the way you assess what worked and what didn't work. But going on from there, do you regularly review the materials used, for example, for insulation, as new things become online, more environmentally friendly materials, for example?
Thank you, Councillor White. Thank you for the question as well. I think this is one that comes up quite frequently, and I think it's really important. I think Councillor Westwood gets a bit tired of my same answer every time. So I apologize for repeating myself, but ultimately when new products come on, we often explore. So there's a lot of people that either contact the team or we go out to conferences and exhibitions to kind of find out about new materials. Sadly, any material that has decreased embodied carbon often comes at a cost, but beyond that, it comes with a far more decreased rating in fire. So for me, insulation and improving people's, tenants' properties, absolutely the health and safety of our tenants comes first. And we need to ensure that we better those properties or at least keep them in the same compliance standard. So yes, I'd absolutely love to embrace low embodied carbon products, but we really need to ensure that fire rating is at the top of that list. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashanta, and I'm never frustrated. I'm always learning from you, and thank you for continuing to guide me and teach me. I see no more questions. So firstly, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, your update today. I'd like to thank you and your team for everything that you are doing to drive this programme forwards. As I said in my introduction, this is not a technical upgrade to our houses, that we are having to work with people. We think back to last year when we had pushed back because we were working in the lofts and we had the conversations around what do we do with that stuff that we stored up and so on. It is a learning process for us. I agree with your comments around quality versus quantity, and to satisfy me that we will get to the end of this programme, because we have a statutory responsibility to upgrade these homes by a certain date. And I have asked for that forward plan, if you like, to so that we understand exactly what we need to do to get to the end by the correct date, and we therefore are planning out our work and work more effectively with the ward councillors and so on and so forth. And you have a comment.
Apologies, this is probably not in sequence, but when I first started, we held a councillor briefing session that was done in the evening. And it was, I think, quite helpful. Would there be appetite for that so that we can inform councillors and therefore use their abilities to help reach out to tenants?
I'd be absolutely delighted. There will be appetite for it. I think it's appropriate. And Mr. Andy, could we just take an action to organise that, please? Thank you. Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 10, which is the temporary accommodation plan and pathways. This is a really, really important paper that's coming to this committee, and I will go through my introduction in a moment. Mr. Tate, again, I think you wanted to speak on this, so I would go through my introduction first, if I may, and then I will call you for your question. And then we will, what I plan to do is just to walk through the sections of this paper and take questions as we go through it, because I think it's worthwhile just to discuss the various different sections to make sure we've got a clear understanding. So this report is brought to this committee in response to the increasing levels of homelessness reported across the country, with a reported £1.7 billion a year being spent by councils in England to house people in bed and breakfast and other temporary homes. In the last financial year, this council has experienced a 122% increase in approaches from households who were homeless or at risk of homelessness, thereby intensifying the pressure on availability of accommodation and staffing resource in this council. In addition, Hampshire County Council has actioned a spending review to save £132 million to address a predicted budget shortfall, and this impacts some Hampshire County Council funded social inclusion services for vulnerable adults throughout the Winchester district and the wider county. One impact of this is the withdrawal of services from Westview House, which will result in the loss of 29 bed spaces. The council is committed to preventing and relieving homelessness, ensuring that everyone within the district receives housing advice and appropriate support if they are homeless or at risk of homelessness. It is recognised that Winchester Council cannot prevent homelessness alone and works in close partnership with statutory, voluntary and charitable organisations to achieve its outcomes, including Trinity and the Beacon. We're fortunate to be in a position where our use of bed and breakfast is low, and we make good use of our own housing stock to manage additional spend. However, we are aware that the trend across the country may result in increased numbers of people presenting homeless in our district, and with the future withdrawal of Hampshire County Council funding. Both will have a significant impact on the current position. To address this challenge, it's imperative the council formulates a robust response to the escalating need, not only by expanding the accommodation options, but also by ensuring adequate staffing and resources to effectively manage households' increasingly complex situations. This paper looks at the predicted level of homelessness in the district and identifies 6 specific proposals for managing that growth using our temporary accommodation resources and to manage the financial impact on the council. In addition, the paper presents 8 housing pathways and options available to residents of the Winchester district tailored to their specific circumstances. These pathways have been devised in consultation with our voluntary and statutory partners for different 8 client groups. If agreed today, the recommendations in this paper will ease the financial pressures on the council and offer support to the growing number of homeless approaches this council is already seeing. Mr. Tate, would you like to come and ask a question? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet again. I have regularly spoken at Cabinet about the number of Winchester residents who have been threatened with being made homeless by their social landlord, so this paper is of great interest to me. For reasons I don't quite understand, I seem to be a point of contact for a number of people who are either threatened with homelessness or are homeless, and I do undertake some advocacy work for, as I say, some people threatened and some people who actually are homeless. Having read through the various appendices, I would be grateful to understand where 88 Sussex Street figures in the council's plan. Bullet point 5.1 of the report mentions the need to make best use of all housing assets, including those owned by the council and other partners. The council owns the adjoining properties 80 to 86, and the paper details future plans here. At the Cabinet meeting on the 22nd of May 24, the leader made some very helpful comments regarding 88 Sussex Street, which is in need of significant structural repairs, and once completed, the property would be re-let as 2 flats. I ask, is this still the case? And if so, when does the council plan to undertake the work so that the empty ground floor flat can be brought back into use after 2.5 years? Some of the comments that both the leader and yourself has made have been very helpful to the wider context. So I go on to say the Hampshire Chronicle has been reporting the actions of Bournemouth Churches Housing Association, who have or will be selling all their Winchester properties, which at one point provided temporary and supported housing for around 36 individuals. As this paper makes so clear, this number of housing units would make a significant and positive impact to the provision of much needed temporary accommodation. So in my mind, and I appreciate Cabinets as well, it's hugely regrettable the bulk of their properties have been sold to private buyers, and so they've been lost from the Winchester pool of temporary accommodation. I do want to make it clear, I do believe Bournemouth Churches are an organisation of the highest integrity. I've met with their chief executive and their chair of trustees, so I'm not in any way questioning their integrity, but I think the impact that it's had on Winchester has been dramatic and very negative. And I'm grateful for the efforts of Mr. Hendy and Cabinet in trying to resolve this situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. I'm going to ask Mr. Hendy if he can comment on both of those, but I just want to say that both of those, we are unable to make any comment on any of the individual cases involved in that, so these are general comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You've stolen the words from my mouth. Unfortunately, we can't sort of share the situation of individual tenants, specifically in relation to 88 Sussex Street. We're keen to engage with the tenants there to see if we can bring that property back into use, see what is possible there. And I know Mr. Tate is aware of that, and we're grateful for the advocacy that Mr. Tate has been involved in that particular instance. In relation to BCHA, again, we're keen to work with them. We have ongoing dialogue with BCHA in terms of making offers for the properties they have on the market at the moment. So we're hopeful that we can be successful in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Hendy. Just sort my screen out. Bear with me a moment. Thank you. What I propose to do on this paper, if that's acceptable, is just to go through it, not section by section, but in blocks, just to ask for questions, just so we can structure the questions rather than move all over the paper as we are around the table. So I've broken it up on my notes here into various areas. So the first area is sections 1 through 5, which is the council plan outcome through to property and assessment implications. Do we have any questions on that area of the paper? Councillor Power.
Just one, Chairman, regarding the financial pressures on the council. There were some measures in the budget to address homelessness. Will they have any impact on this council? and what will that be?
Mrs Thorburn, if you can help us with that, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Power. Yes, the budget did announce a significant amount of money for homelessness and rough sleeping, but that hasn't trickled down to us yet to know what our allocation will be. However, last week we did receive £22,000 to help us with rough sleeping over the winter. So myself and officers now need to decide how that's best spent with our partners. So hopefully by the new year we'll be able to report back on what that sum of money might be. Thank you.
Do you want to say? Thank you, Mrs Thorburn. Councillor Cutler.
Just to add to that, the MTFS paper has been published for scrutiny yesterday, and we do propose to increase the budget on for homelessness and to put aside a reserve, a specific exceptional homelessness reserve, on the basis that these figures show a wide range. So we're going for, sort of covering the middle, but a reserve there because of the possibility that it could escalate without, so that we're prepared for it, I suppose. So those details will be in the scrutiny paper.
Thank you. Any other questions on section 1 to 5? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. I was going to ask the exact same question about the new money. Do we have any idea when that might be? Because obviously in this paper there are quite a lot of unknowns about grants that are finishing. We don't know whether they're going to be continued, and if so, our allocation. So ensuring that we have the flexibility in what we're doing to understand what might come in and alleviate the pressure would be helpful. The other question I have here is one of the other significant moving parts is the decision by Hampshire to extend the funding until March 26th. But around the Westview project, but also the decision for the provider to pull out of that. And obviously that's a very significant piece of the equation in terms of beds and support. Do we have, and I don't see that particularly addressed in this paper, is that something that we have as a sort of separate train of work to consider, and how that might bring some benefit potentially during the time frame that we're talking about? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the grants, I think Mr Thorburn, you're best placed to update us there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Yes, we won't find out our grant allocation for 25-26 until at least January of 2025, which doesn't give the officers and team a lot of time to plan and bring a spending plan back to Cabinet, but we will do as soon as we are aware. Your secondary question regarding Hampshire County Council and their funding. Yes, we started this paper a long time ago, and we've had to change it in line with as Hampshire County Council have made their decisions, and they have extended the funding until March 2026. But for us, with A2 serving notice on their contract, that means all Hampshire County Council are committed to funding from next April is the £24,500 to the Beacon and the 13 beds at 84-86 Sussex Street. We're working very closely with our commissioning colleagues at County Council for some of the funding that would have gone to Westview in that last year, and I have a meeting at the end of November, and hopefully they'll be able to give us our decision at that point. But the paper outlines what we've requested the funding for. Thank you. I hope that's answered that. Thank you.
And just to add to that, Mrs Thorburn, we've had a conversation about Westview many times, and I'm well aware that we have dedicated officers aligned. So maybe it's worth just a comment on how we're working, and we can't go into any individual cases, but how we're working with the residents there to ensure a smooth transition that we know is coming.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so initially Westview House housed 29 residents, and when we were aware of the closure, we put a plan together with A2 and our commissioning colleagues at county on how we could move on the residents of Westview to enable that they may have somewhere to live. So we have a dedicated resource now that we've moved from our temporary accommodation team over to the Westview team to work with all the residents that are left there to try and make them tenancy ready. Now that could be to go into their independent accommodation, and if they're ready to go into their independent accommodation, they will be given the highest priority on Hampshire Home Choice, and their housing options officers will be bidding for them. Some of them may need to move to alternative supported accommodation, so we are working with our partners through our pathway meetings to find suitable vacancies. That may mean that we have to move people on from those projects into their independent living. So there is a lot of work going on by the officers behind the scenes. I am pleased to say though that there are only now 15 residents left at Westview House for us to try and resolve their housing needs. We are seeing an impact though of this closure, not only on approaches to my officers, but to the partners such as the Beacon and the Trinity, especially their day and advice services. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on sections 1 to 5 in the paper? No. So we look at sections 6 to 11, which is consultation and communication through to risk management. Any questions on that section? I'll give you a moment to look. Okay, I see no questions on that section. Section 12.1 to 12.12, supporting information. Councillor Horrell.
Sorry, Chair. If we're on the consultation, are we including in that point the Appendix 4, which is referred in 6.1?
I was going to come to the appendices separately.
Thank
if
you.
You're happy, and I'll ask questions on that specifically. Okay. All right. So section 12.1 to 12.12, supporting information. Quite a lot of information in that section. Any questions or clarification? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, on section 12, then the various proposals. You included 12, I believe.
Section, I'm going to go through the proposals one by one. Again, so I'm looking at sections 12.1 to 12.12, which is all the supporting information, and that will lead us into the separate proposals. There's a lot of information in that section that sets the scene as to why we have chosen and selected these proposals for change, and it sets the stall out as to what potentially will happen.
Could I therefore ask on 12.10, the statement says that we will have a reduction in the bed spaces of 29. It goes back to my question, is are all those bed spaces going, given where we find ourselves, or are we somewhere in the middle here, or where does that net out? Because I'm not sure it's quite as black and white as 29 to 0 at this point, but I may be mistaken. Thank you.
Mrs. Thorburn, is there a succinct answer to that one? I mean, clearly the 29 bed spaces will be lost when the accommodation closes.
Absolutely, and I think this paper is demonstrates how we're trying to recoup some of those bed spaces by implementing the proposals that the paper is suggesting.
So if I was to summarise that, the proposals that we're going to come on to talk in detail on each proposal in a second are allowing us to free up more of our accommodation for temporary accommodation, or speed up the throughput of people through that accommodation to allow us to cope with the 29 bed loss and other pressures coming through.
But Chair, can I just ask a supplementary to that then? Is that facility, which we have some questions about its suitability and construct and location, but that is still a facility that has been used in a particular way, Are there any plans for that to go to another provider, another organisation that would provide any additional accommodation to help us in this situation? Thank you.
Thank you. Not currently. The building is owned by A2 Dominion and they will be taking a paper to their asset management board December to just with recommendations of what they wish to do with the building. Until that point, we're not able to comment any further. Thank you.
Lots of hands. Councillor White.
It's a question about on 1210 about how you have arrived at the projected figures for the number of households requiring assistance. It says it's based on previous demand. Is that the only thing you've used to predict those? And could those numbers be higher given the pressures that you've mentioned in the report coming down the line?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor White, for your question, and that's a really good question. I'm surprised Charlotte and I aren't grey actually over this piece of in the report, and I'd like to thank at this stage Kevin Harlow actually in our finance team who's helped us tremendously with trying to predict the data. What I would just like to say, Q2 of 24-25, when we dispatched the report, we didn't have the real data. We now have the real data, and we predict demand of 155 households. The real demand was 152. So our predictions were, virtually spot on. What we've done is looked at the past 2 years, looked at the percentage increase each month, and then taken a formula. I've worked in homelessness a long time, sat here, so have my colleagues sat with me, to know that homelessness is very hard to predict, not only because of macroeconomic factors, but you just don't know what's going to happen in somebody's life tomorrow. So I think with the data available, this is the best prediction that we were able to come to. And I think actually it's quite accurate this quarter. So Charlotte and I did do a little yoop yesterday. Thank you.
Can I just add to that as well, that this is not a plan that is set in stone for life. This is a plan for today, and this will be under constant review. And I believe there's a recommendation that says we will review this within 12 months anyway. But this is something that we will operationally discuss and review on a very frequent basis. And if the numbers start to move away from where we predict, then we will have to review and revise our plan accordingly. Councillor Power, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. I'm looking at the number of families requiring assistance for accommodation. I think this relates to our under occupancy work. Are we still offering assisted moves? Is there any merit in upgrading that assisted move offer? I'm very fond of the people I have locally under occupying, but I also recognise the need for family accommodation.
I can ask Mrs. Knight or Mr. Hendy if they'd like to help us with that.
Thank you. We do know we don't have the incentive scheme anymore for people to move. That we have absolutely exhausted that. It's more the attachment that people have to properties and the physical help with moving. But we do try to promote other options that we can help through the tenancy sustainment team with funding that they have and with physical support to move. But yeah, it is a frustration situation that we have quite a lot of people under occupying in family homes.
Any further questions in the supporting information section? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, 12.8, you are recommending that we have a tenancy ready post, and it was written in the recommendations to really address the impact of the cut from Hampshire funding, whatever level that is or whatever timescale. However, in Karen's comments, she said that many of the individuals are not really tenancy ready. They need to look to other types of accommodation. So can I just understand that new post? Are they about helping individuals to move through to whatever accommodation is appropriate, or is it about actually acquiring a tenancy? Because there's sort of different elements that are required. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. At the moment, we're piloting a tenancy ready officer, but they are working specifically with our Westview clients, and we're monitoring the outcomes of that very closely. The idea of this post is to work alongside a wider cohort within our temporary accommodation. So you may have residents in Bradbury View, the Beacon, our temporary accommodation that just need that little bit more support, a little bit more of a push to make them tenancy ready to go out into the private sector or to be successful and be accepted from a landlord off the housing register. So our vision for the post that we're proposing is wider than the post that we're piloting at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on this section before we move on? Okay, so if we move on to proposal 1, which is the use of 82 Sussex Street as temporary accommodation. Any questions on that proposal for clarification? Proposal 2, to amend the current move on policy for households in council owned temporary accommodation. See no questions. Proposal 3, to expand the provision of supported accommodation at Trinity. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, could someone just help me to understand the last part of that policy, which says that there are 3 bed spaces, but in the time frame, and I'm not sure what time frame it is, it would create a total of 5 bed spaces, which doesn't indicate a very quick move on. So whether I'm misunderstanding all the time frame, perhaps that could be clarified, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. This is something we've most probably had to predict because it will create 3 new bed spaces, but then there may be a throughput of 2 people moving through by the end of the financial year. The work's slightly been delayed on refurbishing of those 3 rooms. So when we wrote the report, we were confident those rooms would be available maybe by Christmas. I think they've been pushed back a few weeks. It's very hard to predict throughput, because you don't know what's coming through the housing register or in the private housing stock. So Charlotte and I have had to look at figures and really come up with what we feel would be most appropriate. So it may be that 2 could move through, they may not, but we will be reviewing this data now on a monthly basis. So when we come back in 12 months, we'll have more accurate data. Thank you.
The time frame is 1 year.
A quarter. Thank you. So we were hoping, if it was ready, that we might have moved 2 through by March 2025. Thank you.
Proposal 4, amend the council's letting policy in respect to sheltered accommodation. Any questions or clarification there? Councillor Horrell.
A really significant proposal with a very high impact of change, which is great. Although there's clearly comments from tenants, being current care tenants, about changing the balance and equilibrium, which obviously some of our accommodation feel that they have a good way of working and living together. Are we planning to do anything specifically to make sure that those fears are not real and that, you know, that there is no impact from younger people moving into the schemes? Thank you.
Mrs. Thorburn, I think we cover that in the paper actually, so you just want to bring that out so that it's well understood.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Yes, currently our other 4 local authorities within Hampshire Home Choice, whether there aren't any stock owners, so that it's through registered providers, do let their older persons accommodation to 55 plus, and so do the RPs within the Winchester district. So Winchester City Council's letting policy is a slight outlier compared to all our other partners' policies. Charlotte and I conducted the consultation ourselves. We went round to some schemes, and we also asked everybody on Hampshire Home Choice who had an interest in residing in Winchester. And I totally understand the tenants' concerns and reservations. However, anybody who's nominated to a property has to go through the checks that the RP or the council do for any tenant. So if there are support needs, or if they feel they're not deemed appropriate for that scheme, then the landlord or Winchester City Council can refuse them. I'm not going to be able to sit here and 100% say that we might not face some issues, as we do with any tenants going into any property, but we will be working our hardest with landlord services to ensure that those nominations are appropriate into the appropriate schemes. I think what is really important, if I may, Chair, to say here, is that we had an inordinate amount of older people, 55 plus, who face homelessness, who don't have any other issues, who are taking up valuable spaces in our temporary accommodation, who could otherwise bid on accommodation. And this is real data. There's 44 within a year that we could have housed. And as I did say to the older residents, because and when I was meeting them, is that they were all 55 at once, and can they remember what they were like at 55? And I think we have to move away that just because you're 55 doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily cause any problems. Somebody who's 75 could cause problems. So I think it's about managing that individual within that individual scheme, but I don't think we're in a position. And what I would also like to add to that is last year, 23-24, we let some of our older persons accommodation to people outside of the Winchester district because we couldn't let and that could have gone to people that were residing in our temporary accommodation. So the officers are very keen, and this is something that we could implement tomorrow. Thank you.
And clearly it needs the right support from our team as well to address any issues that may arise. And we're well aware that that needs to be done. Thank you. Proposal 5, which is the move on policy with Quakers organisation. See no questions. And proposal 6, to deliver a housing first model. Let's give you a moment to look. And I see no questions. Sorry, Councillor Todd.
So housing first, normally, I mean, so for example, I understand the use of a housing first worker in order to provide the support to help people who obviously have quite high needs but are ready to start on that journey towards maintaining a tenancy. But do you have any particular buildings in mind? I'm not entirely clear from the way it's written. It talks about the worker, but we presumably also need the spaces. Is the intention to repurpose existing spaces to provide a place for that support?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Todd. Yes, so we currently have one housing first model in operating at the moment, which is being which we commissioned A2 Dominion to provide the support, and ourselves, Winchester City Council, and a couple of RPs are providing the accommodation. So that would be 7 bed spaces over a 3-year period. I think we have two already in situ, which is really good. So going forward, if we could have another worker, whilst that doesn't create new bed spaces, because we need to take 7 properties out of the housing stock, whether that be Winchester City Council stock or registered provider stock, what it does do is provide 7 bed spaces with the level of support that some of our residents need. And going back to Councillor Horrell's earlier question about Westview, we envisage that may be where some of the residents of Westview will move to, because they do need that high level of support. So I do appreciate it doesn't increase bed spaces, but it does increase the level of support required for some of our most complex individuals in Winchester. Thank you.
No, that's excellent, because I think that's been a question, and I suppose it sort of addresses a fundamental point, which is there are different types of temporary accommodation, and the challenge with the loss of Westview is that, however inadequately, it is a form of supported accommodation, and you can't just replace that with unsupported accommodation. So knowing that we have this, is it enough, I suppose, is a question.
That's a really difficult question to answer, Councillor Todd. I think what the data does demonstrate is that the clientele that are approaching the council for assistance are far more complex and have a lot of support needs compared to maybe when I first started out in homelessness, and it was families, predominantly families. Mum and dad had asked you to leave. Now we're seeing individuals that have a multitude of needs, you know, addictions, mental health, trauma. So I think about 84% of all our households we see have a support need now. So the way we work has changed, and it needs to change because support is most probably as important as the accommodation. I didn't answer whether we have enough knowledge.
No, well, and that's really helpful, and I think it's, you know, it is something that we need to make sure that our MPs are aware of, that we continue to, that the local government association is aware of, that we continue to advocate on our own account, and continue to look for opportunities within our own funding to see how that support can be enabled. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, which brings us on nicely to the housing pathways section, before we go to the detail in the appendices. Any questions, clarification on 1227 through to 1234 housing pathways? That's all.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Karen and the team for the opportunity to have some input to those when you held the forum. That was a really excellent day to be able to sort of work alongside others and have that broader conversation. I suppose again it comes back to resource. 1231. Do we have enough in the housing options team to actually do all of this? Because there's a huge requirement on just understanding those needs of the people presenting to you. It's a hugely draining job, and you need to look after, we need to look after our staff because there's a lot coming to them. Are we sure that we can deliver what you're saying here on the resources that we have? Because I think we have a duty of care to that particular group who are doing a huge frontline job for us. Thank you.
And just to endorse your comment, that is a conversation that I've recently had both with Mrs. Thorburn and Mr. Hendy and Mrs. Knight around looking after the staff and providing the right level of resources. But Karen, can you just comment on the level that's required?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Yes, it's something that I do monitor along with Charlotte very closely. We have grown the housing options team over the last couple of years. I think it's really important to note that the Homeless Reduction Act put a significant increased administration burden on the housing options officers. So every time they change state, so if they go from prevent to relief to full duty, they have to have a full housing assessment. It just isn't at the time that they approach. We have good recording systems and support in place. We have had the conversations with Councillor Westwood and Mr. Hendy and Mrs. Knight about resources, and I am confident that if we feel that we need those, that we will be supported in being provided with those. And this is something that we need to review very closely, but also the well-being of the housing options officers. Everybody that comes to see the housing options officers are coming because they are threatened with homelessness or they are homeless. It's a very emotive subject, and they are really at the coalface because they are hearing things that some people would never really be able to ever imagine hearing. So we also have support in place through HR, that there's an outside organisation that people can speak to if they wish to, either individually or as a group, and that's certainly been taken up by our temporary accommodation team and our Ukraine team, and it is also open to the housing options team. But thank you for asking.
Thank you. Moving on to the rest of the report before the appendices, so sections 1235 through to 13.2, challenges through to other options considered. So in the challenges, we're just trying to list out there some of the pressures that we're seeing that is causing potential increase in approaches for homelessness. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, the section was really helpful to remind us of those other things that you are having to deal with from other sources. and some of the uncertainties like the Ukrainian system. But one thing that and I think we have a reasonable measure of some of that, but one that I'm not really clear on whether you have any knowledge of is the prisoner release situation. On the first wave, clearly we didn't have any impact, but do we have any advance warning of that allows us to prepare for that? Because those individuals may be being released at a time when they're not expecting it and maybe not ready for it, and therefore we need to be on standby. Do we, because we have a prison literally, you know, along the road, what additional information are we getting that might help us in giving the right provision? Thank you.
Charlotte, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. We're having regular meetings, weekly meetings with the Prison and Probation Service. We have the duty to refer process, so any probation service have a duty to notify us as soon as somebody's being released. So we in our pathway meetings, we're very aware of who is in prison and who is due to be released. So there's a number of different pathways and routes that we would ensure that we're aware of anybody coming out, but it hasn't affected us the last two tranches.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. If there are more questions there, I'll move on to the weeds then, the appendices. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the detailed questions on spreadsheet cell numbers here. So Appendix 1, any questions for clarification on the two tables? Demonstrating supply and demand, basically. So I've seen, okay, Councillor White.
It's just to clarify the difference between data set 1 and 2. So data set 1 is if you don't do anything, and data set 2 is if you put these.
If we adopt the proposals
yeah, okay.
as proposed in this paper. Appendix 2 is the financial forecast, which has got some interesting reading. It is what it is, clearly. Appendix 3, the list of accommodation available. Don't think that's really contentious. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you for the list. Are there any other properties? Well, there are other properties clearly in our portfolio as a council, but are there others that you have considered or rejected, or others that are on standby just in case?
I presume you're alluding to the Barnes House property in that question. She might be, might not. See if you look.
There are several.
I mean, clearly there are other properties, but these are the properties that are considered viable. Mr. Hendy, did you want to help us with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure, Councillor Hall, because you raised the points at last year's housing revenue account budget, because there was a proposal to dispose of Barnes House, and I think what's happened is we've decided to take stock over the year and see whether it was possible to use Barnes House for temporary accommodation. At the moment, I have to say it's not viable, unfortunately. We've assessed the cost of works that will be required to bring Barnes House back into use for temporary accommodation against the rents that could be generated against the units there, and it would not be a viable proposition at this point in time. However, we are carrying on to look at that, and there might be other ways that we could use that property. If not, then we would have to recommend back to Cabinet to proceed with the disposal of Barnes House, because obviously the housing revenue account business plan is premised on generating that £750,000 capital receipt.
Thank you, Mr. Henley. Moving on, Appendix 4, pathways, quite a meaty section. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, as I say, it was a really good opportunity to review these in detail at the recent forum, but can I just clarify, because we are reliant on our relationships with others in here, clearly, that all the other organisations mentioned in the pathways that may be playing a role at various levels are on side and working alongside us on all of these, because this is very detailed, really important work for the individuals. But are we joined up in the way that you would want? Thank you.
Charlotte, you're looking as though you're going to help us with that.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll try. I think so. We obviously, consulted at our homelessness forum and asked for all the input, and we've gone back to all the services since then. And I think, these will be a moving feast as soon as one looks like it's completed. Something changes and we have to change it again. So I would say so. We have good relationships with our partners and are, continuously meeting with them to look at what options they can support us with.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to near at the end, Appendix 5, consultation. So this was with respect to the proposal 5 for sheltered accommodation. See no questions on that section. And finally, Appendix 6, the equality impact assessment. Okay, thank you. So we've walked through the paper. I think I'd now like to move on to debate. So is there any debate on this paper? Councillor Powell?
Sound proposals, Chairman, and we have to give it our full support.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell, I think I see your hand.
Chair, it's a really, really helpful report with a lot of detail, and we knew that this was a difficult issue to predict. You've obviously reached out really well to others. I think your proposals, all 6 of them, all of them have merit, and we should give you our support. I endorse completely the idea that we keep this as a live document and review. I think this will move clearly over the time, and there will be other elements that come in that impact us, good and bad, along the way. So we must remain flexible and take on board the officers' learning, just as we were hearing earlier on retrofit, that learning as you go through and the experiences you have. But I think we should be giving you our support. Thank you for answering all the questions this morning, and we should be making sure that we action this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Todd.
Yes, I'd also like to thank officers for all their work on this. We've known for some time that this is coming. We've seen other cities and other parts of the country come under enormous stress on temporary accommodation, and for a long time we were doing much better. We continue to do much better than some of those authorities, and that's a tribute, I think, to the service and the work that officers have done over many years, that we have been good at helping people with homelessness without being forced to end up using as much temporary accommodation as some others have done, and particularly the bed and breakfast. But this pressure is a national pressure. It's happening everywhere, and I'm very pleased that we've done this work to get ahead of it, to look at the national factors that are affecting us, but also some of the particular local ones, such as the situation with A2 Dominion and Westview. And I think all of these proposals that we have in front of us need to be supported. But I also fully support the idea that this is a live document, this is a live process, because we know that nationally and locally we are not out of the woods yet in terms of these pressures, and so it's incredibly important that we stay on top of what's happening. We observe any extra pressures that emerge, and the challenges section of the paper highlights some of those, and make sure that we continue to work to ensure that as few people as possible, that as many people as possible are helped from homelessness to having a home, because I think we all feel that it's one of the most important things that we do as a council. So thank you very much indeed for this work, and all strength for delivering the plan that's in front of us and continuing to stay on top of any further changes that we need to make.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Powell. Councillor Clear, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to thank all the officers. We know you work hard and you're doing a brilliant job. But I think to eliminate homelessness is one ambition. But we would all acknowledge that this will take a while. So we need to help along the way. It's vital that we give them as much help as possible. So thank you, and I fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clear. Any more debate? No, I'll just summarise then. I'd really like to thank all of the officer team from the top and all the way through for the work on this report, which has been a long time in the making. And it's been through various iterations, and we've had to revise this report even up to just a few weeks ago. The situation is changing very quickly. I think one of the points that was raised by Councillor Horrell, and is something that's dear to my heart as well, is that we need to understand the impact on our people in dealing with this. This is not an easy job to do, and you see things that you don't really want to see, and so the support for the staffing and putting the right numbers of people in place, giving the right support to the staff is vital, and I'm really pleased to see that as part of this paper. In terms of the accommodation that we have, then we are a very lucky authority in that we do have a significant amount of accommodation that we can use and use it effectively. And I'm sure that as we go forward another 6 months, we may well need to revisit how we best use that accommodation, as well as we see the direction of travel with the numbers here. And I would be looking for the government to be clear on their funding, future funding for this area. This is something that we are dealing with, but this is a national issue and needs to be addressed head on. So the Cabinet Housing Committee has been asked to agree the following, and I apologise for reading it all out, but I think I need to do this. Firstly, that 8082 Sussex Street is repurposed as temporary accommodation. To amend the current move on policy for households in council-owned temporary accommodation. To support the expansion of the provision of supported accommodation at Trinity, Winchester. To amend the council's lettings policy in respect to sheltered accommodation. To agree the revised move on policy for applicants residing at the Quakers. For the council to enter into negotiations with Hampshire County Council regarding the level of funding that the council require from Hampshire County Council to support the households affected by the closure of Westview House, in light of the social inclusion funding being extended until March 2026. This support is outlined in recommendations 1 to 7 below. So 1.7, move on to those. To agree to establish a Housing First worker to support the delivery of in-house housing model, Housing First model, get it right. To agree to continue to fund the role of the Complex Need Navigator for 18 months, to agree to establish an in-house tenancy ready post to provide intensive support to help the individuals who are directly impacted from the Hampshire County Council funding cuts to be able to move on and successfully sustain their tenancy within the community. To agree to extend the temporary staffing posts of the outreach worker and strategic housing support worker to the 31st of March 2027. To agree that this strategy will be reviewed in 12 months in light of confirmed additional demand and the impact of proposals. And the Cabinet Housing Committee delegates authority to the Strategic Director with Housing Responsibility and Housing Cabinet Member to agree any further additional spending of the Homeless Prevention Grant Reserve or the allocation of the 2025-26 Homeless Prevention Grant and any new additional grants awarded to the Council by central government that support preventing homelessness and rough sleeping. Colleagues, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Final point, final item for the meetings. The date of the next meeting is Tuesday, the 5th of February 2025. The agenda for that will be determined over the next few months. And with that, I thank you all for your support today and your valuable comments and input, and close the meeting. Thank you.